So the ANC says to its deployees today in this NEC that we've got to stop load shedding, and that's the mandate we get from conference. And today, that's why I'll give to Comrade Skutla to go into detail in terms of the presentation that has been taken into the ANC, the areas of intervention. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much, Comrade Mamoloko, and good morning. Thanks for extending this opportunity for us to share with you the deliberations in the NEC. As Comrade Mamoloko has indicated, the NEC sees this as an economic emergency that requires extraordinary measures for us to be able to address the challenges of load shedding. And one of the issues that the NEC raised was increased levels of sabotage on the infrastructure. Of course, it's about logistics infrastructure, water infrastructure, but in this instance also about the electricity infrastructure. You saw the manifestations of these acts of sabotage most recently now in Tshwane, when our pylons were under attack, they collapsed, and major parts of Tshwane, Pretoria East, were without electricity for a considerable period of time. And also that undermined the ability of rainwater to replenish the reservoirs. And that's why a lot of areas in Tshwane, Waterkloof, parts of Tshwane East didn't have electricity for a period of time. So the NEC has instructed that the deployees should accelerate our efforts to address the issues of sabotage from an electricity point of view. What we're doing is that we've got, I think it's work stream number 6 that is focusing on acts of sabotage, corruption, and malfeasance in the area of energy generation. And now the NEC has considered and applied its mind, and we have agreed on that there has to be 2 parts to the intervention from a timeline point of view. The first one is the one that is immediate, what we call the winter interventions. Because why is winter receiving a special attention? It's because we know that the demand is going to far outstrip supply. It's going to increase exponentially, and the gap between generation or supply and demand is going to grow, and therefore we need to employ extraordinary measures to close the gap so that we don't put additional pressure on the South African economy. And that's the period that what we call the timelines 0 to 6 months. So 0 means these are the actions that have to be taken up immediately, and then the next timeline is 6 to 18 months. So the point I need to make is that there are interventions that are residing within the first package of timelines that are going to go beyond accelerated effort. So with regards to 0 to 6 months, so what is it that must be done immediately to relieve the stages of load shedding, the intensity that is, so that the economy can continue to, if you like, sustain itself? Of course, you are not going to avoid load shedding, at least in this period, even with these interventions that we are making, but we want to ensure that the levels of load shedding still make it possible for major industries to operate, for families and households to meet, if you like, their daily requirements. Like I said, for business also to meet their financial, their commercial objectives, for key installations to continue to operate so that there is no collapse to the South African economy. So essentially we are proposing 4 interventions. So the first one is that we need to run the peaking plants, if you like, the open cycle gas turbines. We know that the total capacity there is about 5,300 megawatts or so. And the key intervention is around the availability of the feedstock, or if you like, the diesel, to make it possible for us to be able to address this matter. So what we know about the diesel situation is that in the 18% tariff increase that NERSA has granted to Eskom, the Eskom is building 8 billion rands to procure diesel. And then we know that in terms of the fiscal relief that the Minister of Finance has provided to Eskom, there's an additional 22 billion rands that the Eskom has made available for the procurement of diesel. So the point we're making there is that we have, as I speak to you, confirmed about 30 billion rands that is available for diesel procurement. And then the second part in relation to OCGT, the open cycle gas turbines, and the issue around diesel was that government should consider to buy directly from suppliers, because what that does is it gives us an opportunity to stretch the 30 billion rands, so that whatever savings you are making from cutting out the middlemen, or if you like some of these majors that are providing Eskom with diesel, that saving can help us to essentially procure additional diesel, so we're able to stretch the rand. And then the other third area in relation to the OCGT is that we need to address the logistics issues at Ankerleg, because the diesel that is provided at that power station comes by road. It's road-based, whilst other picking plants is piped, and therefore the logistics there is that you can, as I speak to you now, just have 100 trucks a day bringing in that diesel. But it's a technical issue. The point I'm making is that the NEC has had a overall an in-depth technical discussion of what it takes. So that's on the first intervention, is to ensure that we are able to exploit the capacity that exists in our open cycle gas turbines. If you look at the period, I think it's 2013, 2014 to 2017, these OCGTs, the open cycle gas turbines, were on load. On load meaning they were producing electricity at about 21% of the time. And now as I speak to you, they are producing at about 11.5% of the time. So essentially we are calling on the doubling of the exploitation of the OCGT. Then the second intervention, so that's the first intervention. The second intervention is our continued effort to improve the energy availability factor, essentially the efficiency of the power stations. So what Eskom does, it has also what we call planned capability loss factor. Essentially on their own, voluntarily, they take units out to fix them, return them better health, and we are able to exploit as much as possible the installed capacity or the design capacity of those units. So what Eskom has been doing in preparation for winter, they had ramped up the planned capability loss factor, and part of the stage 6 load shedding earlier on in April had to do with the fact that there was, if you like, Eskom was very aggressive in taking out these units so that we get to prepare for winter. So we know now, between the period of May to June, you are only going to have just 3 units that will be out on planned maintenance. So essentially we are engaging all of these units to ensure that they generate electricity for us, and we are confident that we should be able to get the amount of megawatts that are necessary to provide the relief that is required. Because if you look at the Eskom winter outlook, is that they plan that the unplanned capability loss factor, essentially units that are failing not because Eskom voluntarily takes them out, but because they are tripping and there are issues of maintenance. We need to keep that down to about 15,000 megawatts. But we can see that the trend line suggests that it can go up to 18,000 megawatts. So in order to undermine, if you like, the adverse effects of more units failing, I think Eskom will reduce the rate at which they're taking out units. Like I said, 3 units are planned to go out. And then as part of the work that we are doing, working with the private sector, we have identified also priority stations that requires additional technical assistance to work with the general managers there. And what the NEC said is that let's galvanize this expertise to go and support the work that is done at the station level, so that we are able to maintain the station, the efficiency of these power stations at an acceptable level. And then the third area of intervention is around demand side interventions. So demand side, so remember, to resolve this problem, you ramp up, you either ramp up generation, and that's why I talk about the open cycle gas turbine. I spoke about the the issues around the energy availability factor, that limiting the plant maintenance, and that means that we are ramping up generation. And then the other option is to also ensure that you reduce demand. And our view, in the view of the NEC, is that we must do both, ramp up generation and reduce demand. So on the demand side, we know that in 2010, Eskom ran a very successful campaign. Out of that campaign, they were able to save about 3,000 megawatts, essentially 3 stages of load shedding. So we are going back to that aggressive campaigning. But this time around, we've got the advantage of technology having been advanced. There are load limiters. We can be able to install equipment telemetrics to ensure that we are able to remotely disconnect, if you like, these appliances that are consuming a lot of energy, in particular the geysers. So we know that the households consume close to 16% of installed capacity. At peak, they can consume up to 35,000%, and we know that the total number of geysers in the country conservatively is about 8 million. So therein lies the opportunity. So we're going to be very aggressive and ensure that we support the efforts for the installation of these telemetrics, if you like, innovations to help us to address the issues of demand side, in addition to a rolling a public campaign to encourage households. And then the fourth intervention is around protecting what we call key and strategic installations. So I'm talking about hospitals, I'm talking about data centers, you can mention them. So those are, and national key points. So we're going to come to introduce, if you like, emergency solutions to ensure that there's uninterrupted supply of energy in those spaces. We know that part of what is before the courts or in the public discourse is that please isolate these areas, essentially exempt them from load shedding. But from a technical point of view, it's not possible to isolate or exempt some of these strategic installations. And therefore, what NEC says that in addition to the 3 above measures, make sure that you are able to address this area. So, as a result of this intervention, we think that conservatively we can have either add or save, if you like, in total we'll have about 4,500 megawatts, so it's possible during this period of 0 to 6 months. Remember, this intervention on improving the EAF, they go beyond the 18 months. The period of, we're not going to install 8 million of these gadgets in the next 6 months. So we're going to continue to be aggressive as part of our efforts to ensure that we address the energy security in the country. So that's the first package of intervention. Then the second package of interventions is what is possible 6 to 18 months. So what do we know about the period 6 to 18 months? So first is that the Kusile Unit 1, 2, 3 that had failed as a result of the flue gas desulfurization challenges that led to the structural integrity of the chimney at Kusile. We removed about 2,100 megawatts. So we know that in terms of our timelines, that 3 of these units are going to come on stream. They are going to come on stream late this year. The last of the 3 units is going to come on stream by the 24th of December. The first one will come in November. So we know now that by Christmas Eve, we'll have an additional 2,100 megawatts from Kusile. And then there's an additional unit that was not fired, essentially is going to be commissioned, and this unit will come in February of next year. So that's another 700 megawatts of that will be installed at Kusile. And then the other one, there's a Medupi 4. You know, there was a fire at Medupi in August of 2021. It took out 800 megawatts. In terms of the plan, the schedule was that it's going to come back in May of 2025. Our general managers there in Medupi have done tremendous work, because part of the reason why it takes long is what we call lead items, big items that has got long lead times. So essentially, when you order a generator from the OEMs, because of they are inundated with regards to demand, you have to join the queue, and you find that you are going to get that equipment 2 to 3 years later. So what the team has been doing at Medupi, they've been just, if you like, assessing what is available throughout the world, and we're able to find a generator second-hand in Netherlands. It's about 15 years of age. So you can ask, are you buying a generator that is 15 years of age? Yes, we are doing that, because the design life of this equipment is about 50 to 60 years. So there's still a good 35 to 45 years of life left in there. And as a result of that, we're able to bring back this unit in April of 2024. And then, so that's Kusile, the 2,100 megawatts by December, another 700 megawatts by February, so you have 2,800 megawatts. And then that's Medupi Unit 4. By April 2024, you have got 800 megawatts, so there's 3,600 megawatts there. And then I did say that we'll continue to work on the improvement of the EAF in terms of the Eskom board-approved strategy. By 2024, the energy availability factor should be at 65%. If now you are to factor in the fact that we lost 3 units at Kusile and that the Medupi Unit 4 is not available, if these 3 units at Kusile did not suffer the catastrophic failure, the plan of Eskom board approved, the board approved Eskom strategy of 60% EAF by 2023 would have been achieved. But we are confident we are going to achieve that 65% energy availability factor. And then the fourth area is the issue around the NEC says, look, we are faced with a crisis. So as we speak now, as we are having this press conference, a lot of communities, business are not operating because we are under load shedding. Of course, there's a bit of relief now. We're at stage 3, and it's because of reduced demand and some of the units that have come back. But we know that the winter outlook looks bad. So we're saying in the midst of this crisis, it is important that we continue to sweat the assets that we have. And these are the units that are generating, that are giving us the megawatts, and that there should be a delayed decommissioning of these plants. And as we do that, that should not be undermining our ability for the decarbonization agenda. We are not retreating from the nationally determined contributions. We are not moving away from the net zero path. We are committed to that and the JP program. So that's an important part that must be emphasized, that in the context of those timelines, what we are simply doing is that we need to ensure that the lights are on as we commit, still committing ourselves to that decarbonization agenda, the JP program. And then on the bid windows, we say by May of this year, so essentially next month, we're opening bid window 7. But that bid window 7 must be allocated in areas where there's existing grid capacity. So part of the problems that we had with the previous bid window, the fact that we have not been able to provide the entire allocation, is that in the Eastern Cape, Western Cape, and Northern Cape, we don't have grid capacity. So now, bid window 7 will, of the 5,000 megawatts, we are going to focus on the Northwest, the Free State, Mpumalanga, and Limpopo, because that's where Northwest and Free State, there's still some room for grid capacity. And in Mpumalanga, there's sufficient grid capacity for us to be able to evacuate these electrons. Again, in May, so although I'm saying these projects, the bid windows are opening in May, but you will not see the electricity in May because there's financial close and then you get to construction. And that's the reason that we are saying that they must be located in areas where there's grid capacity. And that's why we're talking these things are possible to get the electrons and evacuate them. That is for the economy to get the benefit of additional generation will happen in that period of 18 months. So the point we're making is that as we are addressing the immediate crisis, we must be able to have foresight to resolve the issues of energy security going into the future. Again, in May, going to go out for 1,200 megawatts of battery storage. Why is that important? is that as we roll out PV, for it to best approximate the base load, it must be paired with some storage capacity, so that during the night and the morning peaks, when you don't have the sunlight, you draw that energy from your storage. So we'll do 1,200 of battery and 3,000 megawatts of gas. And then the other thing that we are going to do, the NEC is agreed, we are going to open a mega window, or if you like, a rolling bid window for renewables. So here we're talking 15,000 megawatts and going upwards. Why is that important? It's important to communicate the message that South Africa is convinced and the NEC is convinced that renewable energy is the future. So our commitment to the nationally determined contributions, the issues around the JETP, the issues around the net zero path, we are reconfirming that stance, and that's why we are opening up this bid window. And parallel to that, the NEC said you must ensure that we start with agency to address the issues of grid capacity, its integrity and capacity, so that as and when these electrons come on stream, we are able to evacuate them. Again, 6 to 18 months, what we'll be doing is to ensure that we procure emergency power. So the NEC was deliberate. You say it's emergency, it means that it's a definite time period, and that time period, in the view of the NEC, it can be more than 5 years. Why is that 5 years? It's because the time it takes for us to be able to get this additional capacity of renewables, address some of the issues with regards to grid capacity, we project it could take us that amount of time. And then as I speak to you, Eskom is in negotiations with additional capacity from Mozambique, about 1,000 megawatts, and we think that once the power purchase agreement is signed, we should be able to have it on the grid in the next 6 months. We do have a grid capacity that comes from Mozambique. That should not be a problem. So in total, we are envisaged that as a minimum in the next 6 to 18 months, there's 12,000 megawatts, the additional megawatts that can be generated to ensure that we don't just address the immediate shortage, but we are able to respond to the ability of the South African economy to grow and address its sovereign ambitions of growing the economy, creating jobs and industrializing. And then in conclusion, NEC says on the back of this aggressive agenda of solar PV, of course, solar PV is also part of what will straddle between the now and going into the next 18 months. So part of that intervention, the fifth intervention on the first one of 0 to 5, is the acceleration of the rollout of solar PV. NEC has directed that government must work out a financing facility that will make it possible for even poor households to access PV solutions, so that these PV solutions are not only a preserve of the rich and those who can afford, those who can raise money through the debt capital market, the commercial banks, but the poor must also have access to that. So on the back of that rollout of PV and the next program of renewable, NEC says we must localize and industrialize so that we are able to create the additional industrial capacity in the country to meet the demand going into the future. And we are confident that there will be investments because they see through of the pipeline and the investors will be able to invest. And then the second one is that we must train as many people as possible to be installers so that in the course of resolving a crisis, we are seizing the opportunities that are sitting in this crisis, and we should be able to create jobs. And as directed, that government must start with immediate effect with regards to the training agenda. So in conclusion, 0 to 6 months, 4,500 megawatts relieve us of that pressure, 5 interventions, and then 6 to 18 months, conservatively 12,500 megawatts. There's a multiplicity of interventions, about 8 of them that are possible. And we think that we should be able to get out of this very, very difficult situation. Thanks, Comrade.